Hi, this is Bill Knauer of Author Magazine, and tonight we're talking to Peter Orullian, author of the debut fantasy epic, The Unremembered. We sat down at Third Place Books in Lake Forest Park and discussed fantasy literature, music, and the importance of putting your butt in the seat. Enjoy.
This will sound a little bit romantic, but when I was about 6, I had a younger sister who's just 2 years younger than I am, and we were very close. And I would tell her extemporaneous stories all the time. And then I found myself, later in life when I found Stephen King, he's got this term called mind movie. And I realized it was the most apropos phrase for me. I'm always doing this. So much so that with my loved ones, I'm often called back to reality from these mind movies. But yes, always. And then in about 6th grade, I authored a little play. It was pretty disastrous, but it was a first real attempt to put something down. And then I did a lot more reading. I would write when I was really moved upon, and often that was by music. A song would just kind of so fill me that I'd have to sit down, and I'd go into what I describe almost as a fugue, not in any weird way, but it would just I would go with the music, and I would just express what was inside. And then sort of a definitive moment happened after I graduated from high school. I picked up a couple of fiction books, and one happened to be a Stephen King novel, and it was short fiction, and somehow there was just an epiphany there, and I started to write my own short fiction. I took an English degree, and when I moved to the Pacific Northwest, I said, I'm going to try a novel. I had no idea. I hadn't even really sort of been taking workshops or anything, and I wrote 4 books, and then Tor bought the second book I wrote after I had gone away from it for a little while, which is the fantasy. The genre does some things, I think, as well, if not better, than a lot of other genres. The explorations you can make of dichotomies like good and evil. And I don't mean evil with the capital E. I mean the kinds of things where there's injustice and inhumanity, and those things can be defined as dark. And it's okay to say that, where in a lot of fictions, people don't want to observe things in that way. In our world, that's it's too close to religion. But if you kind of set it aside, people can embrace that idea, and they can go with people who just are ruthless with power. It's why I didn't blanch when fantasy tropes presented themselves that facilitated the telling of my tale. There's different sensitivities to the use of tropes in fantasy, and I say this a lot, but I think it's really true. If you distill storylines down, and we did this a lot in college, there's not very many.
5 or 6,
right?
maybe.
Right?
Yeah, right.
And so then, and we all know this, and then it all becomes how you treat that. And then with fantasy, there's the way it's treated. There's some things that have a likeness with each other from book to book. I decided not to be afraid of that, with the idea that if it served the story, and if it was through the characters and the emotion was right, that the readers would enjoy that. And I was writing, I hate to quote King again, but I happen to think that he's at a level of craft that a lot of writers, who maybe sour grapes writers, fail to acknowledge. He says, I write to please myself, with the notion that if I can please myself as a fan, I'm probably going to please somebody else. And that's what I did. There'll be people who won't like The Unremembered. My hope is that there's some that do. I think about lyrics, I think about dynamics, I think about rhythm, and every time I start to explore those things as they relate to fiction, I can draw immediate correlations to music. And so in some interesting ways, some musicians that I know and work with, I've said, hey, what do you think of this? Am I really off base? And they've gone and looked at it, and they said, man, I could probably be a writer. They probably could, but the relationship, I think, is probably true. I mean, I don't want to tax the metaphor too much, but I'd be interested to talk to a painter or a sculptor and find how they would think about these principles, the idea of lyricism, the idea of dynamics in your work, loud and soft, push and pull. You don't give up. And you write because you love to write. And what happens is, when it happens, it kind of happens fast. Like we talked about, it's been 2 years since the book was bought. But I was working really hard to get published for a long, long time, working at my craft, enjoying the things that I was putting down, trying to improve on that. And then one day, something clicked. And the thing is this, I don't think there are formulas. For as many writers as I know, there's almost as many stories for how they made their way into print. So focus on telling a great story, and maybe even a nuance of that, focus on telling a story you love. Back to this thing we've said, which is, if you love it, there's probably other people who will love it. And I do believe, ultimately, if you are persistent, I'll quote a writer friend of mine. His name is Jack White. He's a Canadian author, and how he says it is, he says the only way to get the words on the page is to put your ass in the chair. And I think if you continue to put your ass in the chair, pardon my French, good things will happen.